So this is single Arab female, your mom's biggest nightmare and also mine.
And mine.
Not really. You're just a single Arab male. And you can be like single.
My worst nightmare is single Arab females.
So I guess you're sitting next to your scariest nightmare then, right?
Yeah.
So I'm Gheed Saeed or Gheed Saeed. Gheed, like greed without the R, which is how I've been introducing myself since I was like 16, I think. Normally, the idea behind this show is that I'm sitting down with like kick-ass, empowered Arab females and dishing on being Arab in America and all the baggage that sort of comes with it. But I thought it'd be fun to sit down with my friend Louay to chat about, to make this episode a little spicy and chat about the differences.
Bring a lot of flavor to the table.
The differences in the sexes and, you know, growing up male versus female in the Arab culture, because it's quite different. And we're also going to talk about this little essay that I wrote that you had a chance to read.
Yeah.
And it's all about how Arab men basically turn their backs on Arab women.
Totally untrue.
But that's kind of like a dramatized version of the story. The more summarized version is I'm using Arab men as my
I don't have to be used.
my punching bag in a sense to kind of describe our culture and how we treat men and women so differently. But using Arab men as kind of like the reason why.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, well you read it. You read it. So
I've been punched in the face. Yes.
How did we meet?
How did we meet? Yaman, shout out to Yaman.
My best friend, Yuman.
Childhood friend. We basically grew up together. Her best friend.
Yeah, since high school.
You moved to the city. She put us in touch.
Exactly. I moved to New York. I didn't know a single soul, and Yuman put me in touch with you. And
I installed her AC. She was living in.
I was living in 90-degree weather.
100% humidity. I don't know how she was doing it, but thanks
I would
to
say
me.
people describe that I'm very content with most situations, and that's why I was able to handle that for so long.
Yeah, that's just torturing yourself.
I am a little bit of a masochist also, so maybe that has something to do with it. So, where are you from?
I'm from Egypt.
Tell me your life story.
Sure. Born in Egypt, grew up in the Bay Area, California, up until I was like 11 years old. Moved back to Egypt, middle school, high school there.
Mm-hmm.
And then
how was that, like pretty much growing up here and then moving back?
It was weird, like being here, like having most of my childhood memories here in the Bay Area. Here, I mean by here, like in America. Yeah. And then going back, like middle school, high school, it was like kind of hard to fit in.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really like there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did the first year of college there, and then I went to the Ohio State University, and then worked in Columbus, Ohio for a couple of years, and then I moved up to New York City. So,
nice.
Yeah, that's my story. I've been living in the U.S. pretty much half of my life at this point.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, the reason why we're sitting down today is because I wrote this little mini essay. And
just to be clear, I'm not a single Arab female. That's the name.
I am. Hi, Mom. Basically, the summarized version of the story is that I'm tired of seeing the Ahmeds and the Mohammeds and the A's and the whatevers of the world
like
with Chelsea and Allison and Stacy. My version of the story is that I have an excess amount of single Arab girlfriends who are really freaking cool, really interesting, really smart, but they are expected, and society kind of dictates that they're expected to marry Arab men, and in our case, Arab Muslim men. And it just doesn't feel like there are enough of those to go around because all of those guys, like you, for example, are dating white girls.
I mean, what can I say? We're a hot commodity on the market. Like, there's high demand for us.
So I don't want to say that this essay is like a blanket assumption of all Arab men, but it's really tied to my experience as an Arab woman, and some of the frustrations that like I've had to deal with in my own culture. What the essay kind of does, without so obviously doing, is that it showcases that there's a real imbalance of the sexes, which is interesting because I think that's a cultural thing and not an Islamic thing. When you look at the Quran, it's it does say that men and women are equal. I mean, you know this better than I do because you've had like I think a more traditional like Islamic education than me. And it would say that men and women are equal. But I think culture is where the sexes kind of start to differentiate. Oftentimes we kind of place the blame on the religion and not so much the culture that does this. Would you say that's like a pretty good...
Yeah.
Okay. So you had a chance to read my essay, to reread it. I know I read it to you once.
Makes me somewhat nervous.
I want to get your kind of initial reaction, what you think of it. Because we've had this conversation quite a bit about, you know, why you're not super into Arab girls, you know, what the drawbacks are. We've compared and contrasted, and I just want to hear it from the horse's mouth.
Sure. Are you going to read us your essay, or you want to?
I kind of want everybody to read it, but I'll give you guys a little snippet. I'll give you guys a little teeny tiny snippet. It sort of starts with me describing this ailment. I make it sound like it's this disease, and it's something that I suffer from as an Arab woman. And
suffer is a strong word.
Basically, it says, the ailment I suffer from and that many of you have had the unlucky pleasure of witnessing and coming to terms with as a white flag. Now that I'm like reading this over again, it's really dramatic. Flaps in the wind of your own perishes by the hands of Arab men. I don't aim to demonize my brethren as similar to the white man and any other man. I've met good men and bad men and men that I've had no opinion of. Because not all men are memorable. Sorry, boys. This ailment doesn't define all Arab men or isn't an umbrella consequence of a childhood entrenched in Western society. It's an ailment that oft strikes Arab women and creeps its way into the dens of our fathers. White women. Blonde hair, blue-eyed, named Jennifer and Ashley and Rachel. They strike in broad daylight, their dainty white fingers wrapped around the necks of our gentlemen. So I'm being dramatic. I have a flair for it. I know that for sure. But
your words, not mine.
This came about after I was talking to some girlfriends, and I feel like I keep having the same conversation with my Arab girlfriends, and it's like I'm on Facebook or I'm on Instagram and I'm like scrolling my feed, minding my own damn business, and you see Ahmed on a beach proposing to freaking Rachel or Ashley or Stephanie or whatever, you know?
Let them be happy.
I will let them be happy, but I think my concern is that it's not so much this idea of like, look, America's a melting pot. I'm a child of Western society. I'm totally about it. I think it's beautiful. It's awesome. But I don't get that there are some Arab men that like completely deny the idea of being with Arab women. And some of those Arab men are actually the men that would go really well with my girlfriends, for example, right? Because we're pretty like middle ground. We're pretty like, you know, we're not extremists in any sense. We're not supremely religious. We respect our culture and where we come from. You know, I was in an Arab sorority, for God's sake.
The best of both worlds.
Exactly. And it feels like what's available to us is this two sides of a spectrum, which I often describe. Like, on one hand, you have like these extremely like religious dudes, and this is like very much just my singular experience, so it could be totally different for other girls. But you have on one side of the spectrum, you have like this extremely like religious crew of dudes that like I would never have anything to do, like, to, you know, to say with them. We have nothing in common.
Nothing in common, yeah.
And then on like the other hand, you have like just like dirt bags that I'm like, I want nothing to do with you. Like, you suck. And then middle of the road, what I've been seeing are guys like you know, the Louays of the world. This is a compliment. This is a compliment. Oh, yeah. Sit back, relax. You know, who represent the best of both worlds in a sense where like we respect our culture and our family and where we come from, but you in a sense kind of turn your back on Arab women, right? You've described this to me, like, why, what's your issue with us? Like, geez.
First of all, don't put words in my mouth. I have no issues with you. But no, I mean, like you're saying, from your experience, I'll speak from my experience. And honestly, I don't know. I haven't had too many experiences with Arab women or like dating Arab women in particular.
Yeah.
But for me, you know, I don't know. For me, it's just easier to be with like white girls.
Easier in what sense? Like, is it less? I'm just curious. Is it like less pressure?
That's one of the things. Yeah, sure. It's less pressure. It seems like every time I would talk to like an Arab girl or whatever, it'd be like, okay, so like 2 weeks,
what's the next step?
Into like barely knowing the girl, it'd be like, okay, so what are we like? What's the next step? Like, when are you gonna meet my parents?
Yeah, I'm like, whoa. When are you gonna ask for my hand in marriage? When are you gonna give me my dowry?
Yeah, exactly.
I need 100 goats.
So 9 times out of 10, from my experience, it's like too intense, too fast. Got to make it official. Got to like put label on it.
Do you think this is like a product of our age, though? Like,
I think it's probably a product of our upbringing and our parents.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, it's not an Islamic thing. It's more of a cultural thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it stems, I think, from the parents telling the girls that, all right, you're not allowed to date guys unless it's like they're gonna marry you. You got to be official. Like, if you're gonna date someone, bring him over. We gotta like know the person. Blah blah blah. All this. Whereas, if you date a white girl, none of that exists.
Easy.
It's like easy. There's no curfew. Her brother doesn't have to come on dates with us. Like, it's all good. And mind you, from my experience too, like I went to school. I lived in Ohio, which is like a predominantly like a white
community
state. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So a lot of my friends, I had my like Arab crew, but they were all guys. Like,
mm-hmm.
I never really mingled with the group, like outside of those like 5 to 10 guys
mm-hmm.
that I knew. So all my other friends, all the girls that I met, they were just like white American girls.
Mm-hmm.
So by time, that's what I got used to. That's what I became comfortable with.
Yeah.
And it's nothing against Arab girls. It's just, that's what I've been offered. Or, and it goes back to, what you were saying about how we, like the way we grew up, we're kind of in the mix between like both cultures, both,
it's rough.
Whatever. Yeah, you can't really, I don't know.
It's easier for you.
Yeah. Why?
It's easier for men.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, well, it's easier for men, totally.
Yeah, totally.
Do you think that men in our culture get a pass? Because I've seen this happen often where if a guy pulls something and a girl pulls the same thing, like the girl will get ostracized and the guy will just sweep it under the rug. One example of that is this girl in our community got pregnant. Oh my God. Whoa. I had no idea that people in our community had sex, first of all.
News to me.
Whoa, like, wow. She got pregnant and decided to keep the baby, all power to her. We all make our own choices, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. But another guy in our community got a girl pregnant, and they kind of swept that under the rug.
Mm.
And the girl was pretty much ostracized. Like, she was just cut out. And do you think that I think that's like a perfect sort of representation of like the fact that men oftentimes get a pass in our community. We like sweep things under the rug. Like, if a guy's like dating a white girl, whatever, like no one says anything. But then, if a girl does that, woo!
I mean, sure, in that sense, yeah. Like men definitely get.
You grew up with sisters, yeah.
I grew up with sisters for sure. Like, my parents were definitely more strict on my sisters than they were on like me and my brother.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, I'm like to them, whoa. But yeah, I mean, that's the examples you gave.
They're pretty extreme.
The pregnant one. That's an extreme example for sure. Yeah, I think men get passes for sure in our culture, in our society. It's a cultural thing.
Yeah, no,
because I think religiously, they're both equally at fault in that sense.
Yeah, from a religious perspective, totally.
So it's more of a cultural thing.
Yeah. We talked a little bit earlier about the differences between dating an Arab girl and a white girl.
Mm-hmm.
Can you dig a little deeper? I just want to get it from your perspective.
Okay. What differences do you want me to touch on?
Well, we talked a little bit about how there's like less pressure. It's more like fun.
Yeah.
But is it less serious then if it's more fun?
I don't think it's less serious. I think it takes dating a white girl like takes its course. You know, like there's no pressure, so it's not that it's any less serious, but it's, you know, if you want to take your time, if you want to, you know, date for 5 years and then get married for 7 years and then get married.
So crazy to me though. That is so insane.
I'm just giving an example. Whereas, you know, when I dated an Arab girl, mind you, she was like Egyptian from Egypt. Like
from Egypt.
Yeah.
From Egypt. Keyword.
I don't even know. No, but I don't even know if like we briefly dated. Like it was like 3-4 months, something like that. You know. You can't make a judgment call. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like we barely even dated. But you know, it was all like, oh, like parents this, like parents that, like
that's
blah
fair.
blah blah.
That's fair.
So I mean that's like one of the things. Another one, you know, shout out to you guys. There's the cultural thing. Like Arab girls would understand or get some cultural stuff that like white girls won't necessarily. But it's not, to me, it's like not a red flag, or it's not like something I would, I don't know, count as like, oh, okay, like I'm not, she doesn't get my culture, like I'm not gonna, you know, go through with it. It's more of like choosing the one that can understand your culture, is like eager to learn more about it. She's cool with the differences, she's cool with the boundaries, she's cool with whatever it is. But definitely sometimes it's like, oh, okay, like there's this thing like she won't really understand, or she won't really get. I mean, it's like you win some, you lose some. I think there's pros and cons to both.
Fair. I dated an Arab guy in college.
Okay.
And you're right that like I'd never had any sort of relationship with an Arab guy up to that point. And I think that because everything aligned on paper and it was what I was supposed to be with, I put a lot of pressure on it, and I didn't think about it as casual or as like not serious at all, because in our culture you like date to get married, and you date with like intention to get married, and there's a hilarious like thing in our culture that like Arab girls do this often, and it's where like you don't know that she's dating anybody, and then all of a sudden she posts that like she's engaged, and like you look back in her Instagram or whatever, her feed, and there's like this guy does not exist up until the point where she's engaged. And I tell my parents this often, where I'm like, I'm not going to tell you about someone until I've like dated this guy and I know he's for sure after like a year. Like that's when you'll know. And they just recognize that at this point, that this is like the norm. But when I dated this guy in college, there was a sense of familiarity that I'd never felt before, that I didn't have to like explain myself, and that I didn't have to like explain my culture and where I come from and why my parents are how they are. I really long for that sense of familiarity again, I think, for me. And that's kind of what sets being with someone in my culture apart from like being with someone who, like a white guy. Mm-hmm. And we use white guy and white girl as terms of endearment, so don't get like your panties in a bundle. So that's what I long for, and I wonder if that's like something that you're missing or like craving in a sense.
I guess I don't know, because I've never had that like connection. I've never had that experience where, you know, I dated an Arab girl and it was somewhat serious or whatever. It lasted more than like 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I guess I don't know what that feeling is. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's get away from dating for like a second.
All right.
You said you grew up half the time in Egypt and half the time here.
Yeah.
What was that moment in your life in America that you felt like, wow, I'm a foreigner? Did you ever have a moment like that?
A foreigner as in like, wow, I don't fit in like America?
Yeah. Especially having gone to like a predominantly white school and... I'm just curious
I
if you
don't
had that
know.
moment, because I feel like I've had several like little moments like that.
Yeah,
in my life.
yeah. It's
Little
not like
little
one
moments.
moment.
Yeah.
It's several. I would say one of which, like meeting my friends' parents, for example, like white parents. Shout out to white parents. They're like the coolest people ever. Super
It's so
chill.
true. Yeah.
Like, I'm like, yo, are these your parents or your friends? Because what?
Yeah.
I think that's like one of the things that I always tell my friends, like where I'm from, you gotta fear your parents.
Yeah.
Man. Like,
we are so taught to be scared of our parents.
We don't go out drinking with them.
No.
We're like, whoa, we like pray in front of them and stuff. And I guess like for me, like I personally don't drink, so like, but I like, I went to Ohio State, so like every Saturday, like game day, like college parties, whatever.
That's like a personal choice for you.
Yeah, more of a personal choice than anything else. So that's also one of the things. Like I would go out with my friends, everyone would be drinking and stuff like that, and I've gotten used to it over the years. But in the beginning, I was like, oh, okay, this is not really me. It's not who I am, or like whatever. Now I've just like made my peace with it, and I think I'm like comfortable with who I am and what I do. But that was another thing, like kind of adjusting from, kind of growing up in Egypt and then going to college in here in America.
Yeah.
What are some of your
mine are
moments?
two things that I just thought of, but I think can be applied to any foreign kid that moved to America. So my family moved from Iraq, or from Jordan. I was born in Iraq, and then we moved to Jordan, and then my family moved to the States when I was 7. And I remember when I was learning English, I was taught to enunciate every letter. So like peanut butter, I would say peanut butter instead of peanut butter.
Yeah.
And I got made fun of for it so badly. And I was like, yo, like that's how you say it. Like you guys are saying it wrong. And
then they taught me in ESL.
Yeah, actually. And then there was, we have the game Monopoly, like in the Arab world, but we call it Monopoly.
Okay, I didn't even know that.
Okay, well maybe that's just how my parents would say it. And so I would say like, oh, like, do you want to play Monopoly? And I would get made fun of for that. It was rough. It was rough moving out here. I think I was just like, I was so uncomfortable. I was so like
Yeah.
Even like as a child, you are pretty aware. Like one anecdote that I like remember quite clearly is that like I was called Reed my entire life. Like the letter Rein doesn't exist in the English language, and that's how you say my name is Reed instead of Geed. Like Geed is like so ugly in comparison to how you say it in Arabic.
Yeah.
And I was registering for school, and they were like, okay, like you're Geed now. And I was like, what? Who is that?
Was that your parents that told you that, or like
it was like we were literally in the administration office, and I was like, my name is. I had a full on breakdown, and we were in the administration's office for an hour, and this woman will never forget me. This like lady. We were in the administration office for like an hour, and she was trying to say my name until she got it. And that was just like the nicest thing ever, because she was like, I don't want this kid to like be so upset and so unhappy that like she no longer has her name, right? And so growing up, it was like, oh, like Geed, greed, weed, like, kids are cruel. Kids are so messed up.
Yeah.
So those are my little anecdotes.
See, I didn't really have those moments when I was a little kid, because when my parents, like I said, I was born in Egypt, and then I moved when I was 6. I moved to the Bay Area when I was 6.
A little bit close to my age.
Yeah. But my parents like created this life for me and my siblings that we went to like a private Islamic school. Like we would spend our Fridays at like the mosque or community center or whatever. Right. So like all our friends, all our world, they were like all Arab Muslim people. So I never had that like.
I was thrown to the dragons.
Yeah, that's rough as a little kid. All my cultural shocks were like a little bit when I was growing up.
Right.
So I didn't really have that like when I was a little child.
Yeah. No, it was really hard. And you think that like when you're a kid you adjust pretty quickly, and I did adjust very quickly, but it's still quite shocking. Like I remember when my mom would make me, and this is like true of any foreign kid, when my mom would make me like food, she'd make me like livna, livna, and then she'd put like what is that, like
Za'atar.
Yeah, za'atar on it, and like kids would be like, oh, that looks like bird poop. Like what? And now, like, those same kids that make fun of me go to those. They're all about the hummus. I'm like, you asshole made fun of my food when I was little. Like, what a jerk.
That's hilarious.
It's so crazy now, like looking back at it and thinking about that you wish that you could go back to like your young self. Or I think about this all the time, that I wish I could go back to my young self and say, hey, like, don't be so self-conscious right now. Like, things will get better. You're gonna be just fine. Like, life is gonna be really good for you. Anyway, do I feel like we covered a lot of things today?
We did, yeah.
Yeah, I like this. Maybe we bring you back if you guys liked Louay enough. We'll bring you back to the show, to my show.
So wait, before we sign off, what's your solution to this single Arab female?
Yeah, I think like we just round up all of the Arab men and
sounds scary.
I actually don't have a solution, to be honest. I don't have a solution. I don't think it's an Arab man problem. I think it's a cultural problem that like you think or I really think it starts with like our parents and the culture and all of that, like where you were just telling me that it's easier to be with white girls because there's so much pressure to being in a relationship with an Arab woman. And I've experienced it myself where I did place a lot of like emphasis on this because I was told like this is how you're supposed to do it. Like you're supposed to date with intention and you're supposed to know where this is going and you can't just waste your time and all this stuff. And I really think it starts at a cultural level. And I'm not saying that like the way that we do things is wrong. I don't think so at all. I just think that like, why should we have to hide it?
Yeah.
Like, dating and all this stuff, because it happens and it's normal.
Right. And it's
like,
the way of the world.
It's the way of the world. And like, there's no such thing as like, no one's going to accept their parents to like matchmake them.
Right.
It doesn't work like that.
Marriages.
Yeah, that's not a thing. That's not a thing. So, starts at a cultural level, and we'll keep on digging into this in every episode of Single Arab Female. But thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Yay!
So, I didn't get beat up too much, so that was good.
Next time.
Oh, sure.
Next time. Bye, guys.